for any of you that has studied Neville Goddard's material, even though I don't think it was addressed a lot in his books overall, but he did address this point, the point of this video, in many of his lectures that he gave, was this concept of being born from his skull. And it ties in beautifully with what I've tried to share myself in previous uploads as well. Because most students of Neville Goddard have no idea what that actually means. And most people in general would have no idea what it means to be born from your skull. And there was a question posted about this also on Reddit, it seems, a couple years ago, on the official Neville Goddard group over there, where someone simply asked, well, what does it mean? Has anyone experienced this or can explain it? Well, what that means is that Neville, either consciously or unconsciously, was familiar with the act of redirecting the life energy of his own soul, his consciousness, upwards into the brain through the spine and activating all the astral powers of his own being. So you see, normally people go through life, we all go through life thinking we are a physical being. We only experience and are aware of the physical side of our existence. Yet every time we go to sleep at night, we withdraw our attention from the physical side of our being, from this body, this physical world, and we experience what we call a dream world, which is already an astral, non-physical realm through which your soul exists. This is also a hint at what happens after you pass away, physically speaking. You just enter other dimensions. Neville would also talk about this himself, saying that you shouldn't worry about not achieving your goals. If you were to pass away before realizing some goal that you really wanted, well, he would also say, don't worry about it, you'll go on into another world. So he would call it the terrestrial world, I think. Anyways, in the ancient scriptures from the East, for example, from Hinduism, they talk about the astral realm and the causal realm, and then beyond that lies the bliss realm of God itself, pure infinity, etc. Well, they're all wonderful terms that can hardly be comprehended as a mere human being to begin with, but we can grow towards there through the expansion and evolution of our own soul, because that is what life is all about. So when Neville talks about being born again from the skull, again, he's talking about this activity that we can work on for ourselves, which means to redirect our attention inwardly and upwardly towards the astral regions of the brain. Now, it sounds so bizarre, it sounds so weird, but it actually makes a lot of sense if you understand the foundation from which we do this, which is meditation. Neville Goddard would mention regularly in his lectures as well that he would meditate. He would just sit down and then imagine himself being in a totally different place. He would keep practicing that until he could really sense himself being somewhere else. Basically losing track of his own physical body for the time being, so that his consciousness, his soul, could actually experience being somewhere completely else. So the question here then becomes, are you practicing this? Are you working on this for yourself in your own way? Because most people, they study Neville's material and then they want to apply it towards reaching some goals, some money. They might want a partner. They want to find a wife or husband. They want to have kids or whatever it is, a nice home. You see, most people, sadly, and this is in harmony with Neville's message at the very end as well, is that most people sadly only want to use these ideas for physical goals. Like Neville himself would also say that he hoped that people would actually seek God, but he was aware that most people simply are not ready for that yet. They just want physical goals and achieve stuff over here physically, so they will only use it for that. And if you're ready to see God, well then, stuff like being born again from the skull becomes very interesting, because such acts mean that you become spiritually aware. You awaken spiritually within the very depths of your own being. You become aware that you're not just a physical being, that you are an eternal, non-physical being that is one with God. Right now, he would say he was buried in the skull. God being buried in the skull means your awareness, you could say, is buried in your skull, but you are not aware of your own awareness, generally speaking. Most people are not aware of their own awareness. They don't even question that they are aware. What is this awareness? How come I can be aware even if my body is asleep on the bed? I'm aware of stuff. What is that? I'm aware of different dimensions. Isn't that fascinating? Well, most people never question it. They just have their little sleep, their little dreams, and then it's like, oh, I had a wonderful dream, and then they just completely forget about it within a couple minutes after waking up, physically speaking. It's like, well, that's too bad. You're kind of missing an opportunity there to really analyze and further investigate the true nature of your own being, the true beauty of being a child of God, being one with God, ultimately, being the offspring of a deathless soul. And now, being born from a skull, again, means that you become aware of your spiritual body completely, that you no longer identify just as purely a physical human being, and therefore, because of your discovery, your newfound awareness of being a spiritual being, you can then consciously start to work with that. You start to increase it, you start to expand, spiritually speaking, beyond the limits of physicality, and that is how you find this unity, this great miracle of eternal life that scriptures have talked about, that he has also, Neville Goddard, has also talked about in his own wonderful way. He tried to tell and show humanity that this is possible for them as well, but most people don't want to listen to that. In fact, I think the story even went that the more he became spiritually aware, initially, less and less people wanted to listen to him. That's kind of interesting. Why would that be? Well, I guess most people are just not interested in very deep spiritual truths. They just want physical stuff. I know with my channel by now, I actually no longer care if a lot of people were to watch it or not. At one time, I was kind of obsessed with that idea, the idea of reaching a lot of people, right? But now I realize the things I'm sharing is not even meant for the masses, to be honest with you. The masses of people, they're just too busy with physical things. They don't have any time in their heart or soul right now to contemplate spiritual things of God. And that's totally fine. I just share these videos for the ones that do find it interesting and perhaps get some value out of them for their own journey, and that is totally, fine with me by now. And I'm very happy that I reached that place, because before I reached that place, sometimes it could be very stressful. But because of all this, I also realized that's something Neville went through as well. And what's even more interesting is that ultimately he did gain bigger audiences for his lectures of a high spiritual nature, right? But it's even now that he's gone from this planet that it really exploded, if you think about it. It's decades after he left this physical world that people become more and more interested and fascinated by the stuff he left behind, by these ideas and lectures that he left behind. Well, that is wonderful as well. So you see, it doesn't really matter at all what is happening here physically speaking. What really matters is whether you have found your harmony with God or not. Because once you've found this harmony within the very depths of your being, then everything that has ever occurred to you or will ever occur to you will fall into place rapidly. Meaning that you can perceive through higher developed intuitive perception and unity with God the greatest ends to look at any situation. So even if something bad, seemingly bad, has occurred to you, because in my life bad things of course have happened, and in your life I'm pretty sure some bad stuff has occurred, but through a high spiritual developed perception you can see the divine beyond it. You can see how to actually use all the situations to your advantage to grow and evolve even more spiritually. And as that keeps happening, you become more and more identified with the spiritual true nature of your being, and that is when you are, you could say, born from your skull. That is when you realize that you are a non-physical being inhabiting a body. It's no longer just a theory or something that sounds nice. It's something that you will know from experience, that you have went into other dimensions consciously while being fully aware of this power, of this unity you share with the divine. You enter realms where anything is at your command, and you know you're an eternal being that no longer will die when the body dies. You no longer have to fear it. You see other people pass away and you know they only changed dimensions. They didn't vanish into oblivion. They changed dimensions, even though they may have died ignorantly of this fact. Maybe they have not found the unity they share with God, so they die in ignorance like most. But they still are eternal beings, and God is always with them through their own individual eternal journey. the more this dawns upon you that you are an individualized expression of God's infinite nature, the more you will increase that moment from which you were born from the skull. What happens is that the energies, the spiritual energies of your whole being have become so strong, so magnetic, so active, that you indeed will wield the power to consciously leave your body, even to leave the skull, you could say, to go beyond the physical skull, the physical body, and know your unity with all of creation. So what Neville was talking about, again, in his own way, was this ability to withdraw his own life force inwardly, to activate and energize the astral centers throughout the soul, and therefore perceive what he was beyond the physical self. And you can do that as well through meditation, through contemplation, to actually putting in the work, the effort, to reach, to perceive that unity. But again, you can't force this either. You either have the desire to know and be one with God, or you don't. One day you will. This was also foretold in the Bible. One day a hunger and thirst will come over you. Well, I can tell you it has happened to me as well. It was in the making for years, but now it has awakened, and it keeps strengthening. It keeps expanding throughout my entire being. The only thing I want is unity with God. I've already tasted experiences that were of this nature, but now I wanted to make it my eternal abode. I wanted to be one with that forever and go beyond the physical myself. And it's not something I forced myself to want or to desire. It also happened naturally to me. It just happened. It's going to be the same for you. Initially, you will have to become aware that if you find this information, whether it's of me or others, interesting somehow, if it somehow resonates with something inside of you, well, that is like seeds are being planted in your soul and your conscience that will one day sprout up and take you on your own journey through revelation after revelation. God will start to awaken you from within. But some others, they listen to these messages and they don't like it. They think it's nonsense and they don't feel anything. Well, they're not ready yet to know about it. So that is one thing you can at least perceive already for yourself, is if you find this interesting, what Neville talked about and others, then basically the foundation is set. But when it will bloom up into your own individual revelations and experiences and unity with God, only time will tell. But as long as you are in love with the information, meaning you are resonating with it on a soul level, then you will go there sooner or later. And then one day you will also understand what it means to be born from the skull. It's absolutely amazing when it happens. That's all I can say about it for now.